As I drove up to our garage, I found myself worrying that I was later than normal, and I knew Jim would be worried too. I kept building my excuse so that I'd have it somewhat practiced before I walked in. I hadn't fallen into the affair willingly, but now, after 6 months, I craved the sexual highs my lover drove me to. I still love my husband, but for some reason, Samuel does things to my mind and body that I can't resist. I've tried to break it off with Sam. I have tried time and time again. He's just so damn seductive, and he knows exactly how to undermine my will every time. If Jim knew, he would probably be more than angry. I thought that if push came to shove, though, I'd be able to talk him out of a divorce, to get him to forgive me. I had a plan for working on him, just in case. That's how far I've fallen in my 6-month love affair. I've found a new me and made plans to prevent Jim, my loving husband, from kicking me out of his life and home if or when he found out. I was certain that he'd never figure it out, though. I made sure to have sex whenever he showed any interest, sometimes even starting things when I didn't really feel like it because I love him so much. I do love him, really, I do. Once in a while, every few days or so, I'd get that guilty feeling and want to stop what I'd done, to go back in time and never have allowed my attraction for Sam to go so far as to end up in a sexual fling with him. It isn't that I love Sam, because I don't. In fact, at times I don't like him at all. He gets in a mood sometimes while we're having sex and begins to treat me poorly. Those are the times that really give me the big climax, even though I hate what he does to me in the process. I just can't resist him or his ways. I looked into the rearview mirror and checked my lipstick and hair. I took a shower at Sam's place and made myself presentable, but I am paranoid about Jim looking at me and perhaps noticing something out of place that I can't easily explain. I have the same soaps and shampoo at Sam's that I use at home. I even have changes of clothes and underwear I keep at Sam's, just in case. I've been very careful with the plan each time with Sam, especially since that one time 5 months ago when I came home and Jim asked me about my perfume. I realized I wasn't wearing any, since I'd showered at Sam's. I also suddenly remembered I'd put on some of Jim's favorite perfume before leaving for work that morning. I'd managed to dodge the bullet that time, though. I made up a story about having spilled some cleaning chemicals on me while digging through the closet for some tissues our employee kept stored there. Jim bought it, hook, line, and sinker. One last look, and I got out, walking into the house. I stopped at the front door and looked around for Jim's pickup. It wasn't where he normally parked it. He left it on the street, almost in front of the neighbor's house. That was odd. He usually parked it in our driveway. Meanwhile, inside the house from Jim's point of view, I watched Giselle as she checked her face in the rearview mirror. It had been a long, tiring day for me, and I was tired of waiting for her arrival. Of course, she was late again. It had been becoming more normal than an exception. If she had been where she claimed she was, I'd have no problem with it, but that wasn't the case. It had all started months ago, and up until it became totally unavoidable, I tried to find a way to reconnect with her. I tried everything I could think of, but with no help from her. I had made a decision that I wouldn't let her know I knew about her affair. I knew that she had to break it off on her own for it to do either of us any good. Dinners, movies, flowers, candy, I tried all the usual things. I got creative. I made her a special knick-knack shelf, glass encased. I'd picked her up from work on a Friday, and we'd gone into the city for a weekend of love and just going wherever she desired. I tried talking to her about us, but even that fell on deaf ears. The weekend in the city had started with her being angry at me, but by the end, I thought I'd made some headway. That didn't make it through the next week, though. I finally began to confront her, arguing about her hours and her job. All that succeeded in doing was making her angry at me. Our sex life dropped off substantially, and then even more. What had been several times a week and at least 3 times on the weekend had become, well, it had been a week and a half since we'd last been intimate in any way, 2 weeks since we'd actually had sex. She hadn't seemed to notice, as far as I could tell. I had known all along what was going on. 5 months ago, I had actually caught her at it, but she managed to fend off my questions and fire back an excuse about why she had taken a shower at work. What she didn't know was that I had followed her that afternoon, and I knew precisely why she had taken the shower. Her job had absolutely nothing to do with it. Finding out had crushed my heart, but I still loved her enough to try to win her back. She was the woman I wanted to have children with, she had my heart, and I had fallen very hard for her when we first met. Now, well, it wasn't going to be all that hard to do what I had to do tonight. I wondered briefly how she'd handle it when I left, but I thought she'd probably run to her lover, and they'd laugh at me, the fool they had been deceiving all this time. How can a husband compete with a lover who has no need to perform routine acts of affection for his wife? How can a husband not confront his wife about her affair with her lover and try to win her back? Honestly, I tried my damnedest and failed. I'm going to tell her that I have to go out of town on an emergency road trip tonight. It wouldn't be the first time something like this had come up, but it would be the last. You may ask why I didn't confront her. All that would prove is that I caught her, and she'd be sorry that I had caught her, not that she had decided ahead of time to quit. My thoughts were that I'd win her back to me without a hint that I was aware of her indiscretions. That way, I'd know in my heart that she truly loved me. Obviously, now, to me at least, that hadn't worked. What she didn't know was that all my worldly belongings were packed in my truck. I'd split the bank accounts in half, quit my job, and taken an offer from an old friend who lived clear across the country. I had made plans to cancel my cell phone plan, picked up another phone, and paid off my old cell phone plan, a penalty I was willing to pay to prevent her from calling me later on. I had 1 week left on the old phone, and it was a relief knowing that my 401k would transfer to my new employer's savings plan. My cash balance retirement plan would be safe where it was. I was a little upset about having to quit my job, as I liked the people I worked with, and my job was about as perfect for me as any job I'd ever had. It sucked having to walk away from my coworkers, employer, and customers like this, but it was something I had thought long and hard about. I had given it my best shot, and Giselle had totally ignored my efforts, too caught up in her affair to realize she had lost me, or perhaps she just didn't care. It didn't really matter at this point. The papers would be served on Giselle the following Friday, while she was either at work or with her lover. Am I running out on her, you may ask? Yes, I am. It hurts me too much to face her with her infidelity. I know that if I were to confront her now, she'd be sorry, cry, and possibly beg me to forgive her. That's exactly what I don't want. I didn't want to look like some beggar trying to get his wife back that way. What I wanted was for her to realize that I loved her and that she still loved me. I wanted her to see for herself what she could lose. I wanted her to take me back, damn it. Obviously, I lost her lover, even though I know what kind of man he is. I know that she won't or can't see that side of him yet. She will, though, right about the time the divorce paperwork is served or shortly thereafter. Until then, I planned on calling her every night like I usually did, hoping that she wouldn't notice I was using a motel room phone or be too concerned about my not using my cell phone. I figured that she'd never notice anyway, as she always seemed too distracted to really talk to me. Now, I don't know what she expected of me. I don't know why she even started the affair or why she's continuing it. I really don't know what she truly feels about me anymore either. She can't love me, at least not like I loved her before all this started. If she did love me, she'd never have been with another man. She had been with him for months now and showed no signs of stopping. I had given up after months of hard work on my part to try to win her back. I saw the handwriting on the wall. He had won, I had lost. Angry again, I began to work on my fake story, trying to keep my bile down as Giselle walked up to the front door. I went into the kitchen and got out a cold beer. I was desperate to do anything to keep my mind busy while I worked at calming down inside. This was not the time to mess up and blow my plan to hell. After talking to my lawyer, I found out exactly what the courts would expect in our divorce. I was reasonably certain that Giselle would welcome the divorce, since she seemingly had given up on me. Now, I was also certain that she'd have her lover move in with her right away after getting those papers next week. My closet doors were closed, and the dresser drawers too. A casual glance by her wouldn't reveal the almost total emptiness they now contained. I wondered briefly what she would think when she discovered that emptiness. Would she feel anything at all? How would she feel to find out that the few remaining clothes in my closet and dresser were ones she had given me? Smiling as she walked in, she came up to give me a hug. I turned my head so her kiss met my cheek, not a new thing of late. She hadn't complained about it before, and she didn't tonight either. The last sex we had was over 2 weeks ago, and she evidently hadn't noticed that lack of intimacy with me either. Her lover must be really satisfying her. How was your day today? I asked, not really caring what kind of day she had, but I knew I had to pretend to be the same old loving husband she could count on. It was good. You seem upset. Is something wrong? Her reply was automatic, even though she tried to tint it with concern. Yeah, I have to make a trip for work again. I'll be gone a week, leaving in the morning. I watched her for a reaction, only seeing a smile begin on her lips before she forced a more serious concern. Oh, honey, on a Saturday? You have to travel tomorrow? Her eyes spoke the truth, though, and I could see she was really relieved I would be gone. She was even happy about it, more time for her lover perhaps. Yeah, it's going to be a long week. The job is behind, and I have to go oversee the construction. I was relieved that she seemed to be taking my big lie as truth and wasn't getting as angry as she used to. I knew enough to keep my answers short and simple, without elaboration like she had given me over the last few months. That was one of the tip-offs to me about her affair. Her excuses were overly detailed to an extreme. Then one day, I had to take a trip out to a job, and she hadn't argued with me about it like she had in the past. It had caused me some wonder, and not much later, I discovered her affair, and then it all made sense. We had dinner and watched TV for a while. She was in her favorite chair as I sat on the couch, hoping she'd have a last-minute change of heart and stop me from my chosen path that started in the morning. I held out hope for a couple of hours, but it wasn't to be. We had lost it all. I could see clearly now. She sat there, ignoring me for the most part and never once looked at me. It was as if I wasn't even there. She watched TV, but I could tell from her actions that she was thinking about her lover and how much time they'd have together this week. If she only knew that I'd be gone forever tomorrow. Meanwhile, watching TV, Giselle's mind was going full speed. He doesn't suspect. I'll have a whole week with Sam. He'll be able to sleep over here with me, or me over at his place. We'll get lots of sex in, and I know he'll take me out nightly for dinner and dancing too. I know that I shouldn't be happy about this at all, but Jim's trip will be exciting for me. He'll be out of town, and I'll have Sam as much as I want. It will be great. My plan for one last great week just got better. Next week, after Jim gets back home, I'll be able to cut it off with Sam and concentrate on Jim and me. It'll work out perfectly. We'll go out with a bang that night. I rolled over and tried to get Jim interested in some affection, but I found him lightly snoring. He was asleep again. The last few months had been hard on him with his job and all, but it surprised me that he had gone without intimacy with me for so long. The thought entered my mind in an instant, unbidden. Could he be cheating on me with someone? Was it possible that I had missed any signs that he could have discovered my affair, and he had been doing the same to get even? Looking at his face as he slept, I couldn't see anything that would tell me. I knew he loved me. I questioned once again my affair and why I was still carrying on with Sam. Why did Sam thrill and fulfill me? He took me dancing, was okay in bed, about the same as Jim, but it was the other things Sam did that caused me to want to be with him. Jim loved me, and in our lovemaking, that was a difference that I cherished. Sam satisfied other needs for me too. At times, I really liked going out to eat and dance with Sam. He was gentle and attentive while we were out, and it was as if I were the only woman in the world in his eyes. So much so that when we got back to his place or the motel rooms, as the case may be, I was ready to reciprocate for the great times. Our time together had been exquisite, but it was time to stop. Lately, I felt like I was losing Jim, and my greatest fear was that he would discover my affair and either leave me or hurt Sam, or worse yet, do both. In fact, I had noticed that for the last few months, Jim had been working hard to be a good husband to me. A little worrisome thought crept into my mind. Was that because he knew about my affair and was trying to one-up my lover? I dismissed that thought immediately. Had Jim known, I knew what would happen. He would go ballistic and probably go after Sam. I didn't want to have to bail Jim out of jail if he did something rash. I wasn't sure what Jim could or would do if he found out about my affair, but I was relatively certain that he would leave me in an instant. Yes, this week would signal the end of my time with Sam. As fun as it had been, I needed to concentrate on my husband and starting our family. It was time. That morning, I woke to an empty bed. He left without a hug, kiss, or even a goodbye. At first, I was uneasy, even a bit afraid, but I convinced myself that he didn't want to wake me up. Jim is a loving husband, caring enough to know that I was tired and could use some extra sleep. His call that night was good, but nowhere near as good as having him at home with me. Of course, Sam was on his way to our place as I spoke with my loving husband. I was going out with Sam that night, and we'd end up either at his place or here. I'd have my cell phone, and Jim usually called me on that anyway. Jim seemed preoccupied during the call, but I knew that his job was probably weighing on his mind. When he had to go out of town like this, he usually focused on work issues, which left him little time to think about us. This worked in my favor as far as Sam and I went too, so I understood and was understanding of his lack of focus on us at times like this. I was ready for Sam when he knocked on the door. I'd left the garage door open, and he knew to just drive in, close the door, and then come around to the back patio door. I was sitting on the kitchen counter naked, waiting. His voice caused my spine to shiver as I knew what he'd do once he opened that door and saw me like this. "Giselle, are you here?" His deep voice sent shivers down my spine again, and as he walked in, seeing me, the look in his eyes made me wetter than ever. "I'm right here waiting, Sam. Can we take care of something before we head out to dinner and dancing?" "I find that I'm a little in need," I said, hearing lust and deep desire in his voice. "Jesus, oh God, you're beautiful, Giselle," Sam said, smiling as he watched my display. I could never be this open and free with Jim. "I love to tease like this," I replied. Then we took a shower together. After that, we went out to dinner. I didn't love Sam. I mentioned that this would be our last week together too. Still, he had what it took to make me wild and wanton. I never took the time to truly think about my actions and how they could affect my husband's love for me. I just went with the moment and longed for the illicit excitement that Sam brought me. At dinner, we sat near the back in a darkened booth. As we ate, Sam kept feeling me up. After dinner, he took me dancing in an upscale, crowded club. Once on the dance floor, his dancing became suggestive and downright sexual. I reveled in the naughtiness of it all. I mean, here I was, a married woman whose husband was away, out with a lover who was feeling me up in public. It was truly a sexual odyssey I was embarking on, more than anything else. For his part, Sam kept up some gentlemanly efforts, and I was thankful for that. At one point during a slow dance, Sam's hands were on my butt. What would Jim have thought if he'd seen Sam doing that? I wondered briefly. Almost as quickly as the thought of my husband entered my mind, Sam brushed him out with his actions. I saw a few women nearby staring at us with what could only be described as lustful imaginings. Of course, there were a few, thankfully very few, that were more disapproving too. Later that evening, in my bed, in my home, Sam drilled the living hell out of me. As he was doing me for the third time, my phone rang. I answered it, motioning for Sam to be quiet. "Hello? Hey, it's me. I got in a bit later than I figured I would, but I thought you'd want to know. How was your drive?" Jim asked. "Uneventful. What time do you have to be into work in the morning?" "Early. I'm going to hit the hay. Talk to you tomorrow. I love you. Good night, honey." Sam was drilling me as I spoke to Jim. I was troubled a little bit that I didn't hear Jim say he loved me. I must have missed it with Sam screwing me while I was on the phone, too distracting. My thoughts were dropped suddenly as Sam picked up the pace and started to drill me hard and fast. My climax overtook all my thoughts, and for the rest of the night, Sam kept my mind on him and his tool. For the first time ever, having Sam drilling me while I was on the phone with Jim did something deep inside me, making me feel extra sexy or something. The rest of the week went by quickly, and Sam stayed at my home in the evenings. We'd have sex most late afternoons after work, go out to eat dinner, and then come back to have more sex until we crashed and slept until it was time to get up and go to work. I was feeling nasty, knowing that I, a married woman, was sleeping with a man to whom I wasn't married. The sharp edge of excitement that I now craved was like an explosion of lust all week long. Even then, I knew that Friday would be the end of it. I was breaking it off Friday, taking the weekend off and resting up for Jim's return home. I'd begin to make up for my dalliances with Sam and make sure that Jim knew I loved him. Not from Jim's end. I arrived at my new home early in the afternoon. I had driven quite fast, pressing the speed limit and a bit extra that most highway patrol cops would allow. I was in a hurry and wanted to get as far away from the wreck of my marriage as I could. Terry, my old friend, had a pretty busy business going for him. He and his wife had worked hard to bring it from the idea stage into reality over the years. He'd written, emailed, and phoned me, bouncing ideas off my head and trying to get me to work for him. He'd been at my wedding, been a pallbearer at my dad's funeral, and been a close friend since high school. His wife, Pam, was a great lady with a damn good head on her shoulders. I often found myself wishing that Giselle was more like Pam. One look at Pam and you could see she'd never cheat on Terry. She had a look in her eyes whenever she glanced at her husband that shouted, "I love you, Terry," every time. I hadn't seen that look in Giselle's eyes for quite some time now, at least 6 months. Anyway, my new job would involve working on the programming end of things. I'm very good at programming, having been targeted by Microsoft, Sony, and a few others when I graduated. My college master's thesis had been on my pet project in programming, and I'd been working on that idea for some time. I had made arrangements with Terry to share it with him since it was about ready. It was how I bought into Terry and Pam's business. By the time my divorce was over, I'd probably be making some serious bucks for the first time in my life. I timed everything over the last few months to ensure that by the time that happened, I'd be free of Giselle. She didn't deserve to share in my idea or the wealth it would bring anymore. I had put up with her cheating for this long for a reason, and now the end result of that patience was coming along. That thought hit me out of the blue, and I had a twinge. I felt loss, some anger of course, but mostly sadness. I still asked myself why I hadn't been enough for her. I had no answers, and now I didn't want to hear what she tried to tell me either. We were finished. Monday morning dawned bright, and my appearance at my new job was met with surprise. Terry introduced me to the crew, and all of them were kind, positive, and very friendly. The crew was 14 men and women, actually 3 men and 11 women, not counting Terry, Pam, or me. I was welcomed like a hero there to save the day, though the business needed no saving that I could see. The first few days, I was busy moving and unpacking my things, not only in my new office but in my new home too. I didn't have time to think about my personal life, and quite frankly, I was thankful I didn't have to. Anyway, thinking about Giselle and what had happened over these last months could drive me to drink, and I didn't want to go there. Terry and Pam had found me the perfect home to live in. I got the impression the business had purchased it expressly for me. Since Terry knew me fairly well, and Pam had good taste in decorating, the 3-bedroom house was about as great a place as I could have hoped to find. It was mine, rent and payment free. I never had to stay in a motel but for one night. I felt at home almost right away, which was surprising. Pam and Terry had me over for dinner twice that week, and they knew what was going on in my personal life. Pam clucked over me like a mother hen, worrying about me, trying to soften any bumps I might have. Terry patiently watched her, stepping in time and again to stop her from getting too upset about my soon-to-be ex. Pam was a loyal and good friend, 1 in a million, protective and caring. She was soon working on setting me up with date nights. It took a bit of time on my part and on Terry's, too, for that matter, to slow her down. I wasn't interested in any other women at this moment in time. I wanted to get my divorce out of the way and then have some time by myself, figuring out what it was I really wanted in my life. Dating wasn't high on my agenda for the foreseeable future. I got the call from my lawyer on Thursday. "Jim, we're serving Giselle tomorrow at her place of work. It's all set up. The process server will present the papers to her just before noon, so you better be ready for some excitement. I also have some good news. DVDs of the last week, too. She and her lover have been quite busy. Hang in there, buddy, and I'll let you know how things stand tomorrow night." My lawyer was good. She was among the best in the city, perhaps the state. She was one of those lawyers other lawyers shuddered when they heard she'd be representing the other side. In the land of sharks, she was the type, a great white. Her reputation was unmatched. I'd gotten lucky when I'd been able to get her to represent me. At first, my lawyer Amanda hadn't wanted to take me on until I explained what Giselle had been doing and with whom. Once she knew that Giselle had been the one to step outside the marriage vows, she'd not been receptive to my overtures of trying to win her back. And then, To find out who Giselle was seeing on the side, Amanda had insisted that I accept her as my lawyer. I found out over time that Sam had been involved in several other marital breakups, and in each one, he managed to keep out of the throes of discovery, divorce, and the pain caused by his philandering. Amanda had a very special place in her heart for seeing Sam pay dearly, and I think the devil himself would lose out to this lady. It seems that Sam was not only a predator, but he always pushed his conquests into doing more and more, eventually leading them into an almost prostitution-like life. He used women to get more business lined up for his company, for favors to people he owed, and things like that. I knew that Giselle couldn't have seen that side of him yet, but I was certain that if she kept seeing him, she would sooner or later. I knew, too, that Giselle would regret ever having hooked up with him eventually. Too bad it would be too late for her to have me come running too. It happened that Sam's modus operandi was almost always the same: find a woman who wasn't quite there as far as dress, looks, or confidence. Never all, just one of those things, and he'd work on them, get to know them, build them up, get in between their legs, and then, after getting to be their lover, set them up to work for him. He was slick, that was certain. Amanda wanted a piece of him badly, and my marriage was to be the instrument of his destruction, it seemed. The week went by slowly, and each night when I'd call Giselle, it took all I had to act like I cared. That Thursday night, I knew it would be the last call I'd make to her. I also knew that she'd be trying her damnedest to call me tomorrow after being served too. Luckily, my old cell phone would be history by then. Giselle, it's Jim, called me Thursday and sounded down. I was feeling guilty too. I've been thinking all week long, in between my sex fest with Sam, that it was time to break it off. I shouldn't have ever had to break it off to begin with. At different times all day Thursday, I felt like I'd lost something important. I couldn't quite put my finger on what was truly bothering me, but I knew something was going on in my universe. I could feel it. My stomach had been upset, and deep inside, I had a feeling of impending doom for some strange reason. Our conversation was different too. Jim sounded relieved, yet he didn't seem to want to talk to me. He called and pretty much waited for me to carry the conversation. When we hung up, I told him I loved him, and he just said goodbye. Had I known then what I know now, I'd never have let him go on that trip. I'd have begged him for forgiveness. Hindsight is always 20/20, isn't it? I put my worries out of my mind, and as I turned from hanging up, I began to tell Sam that this would be our last night together. I was breaking it off with him now so I'd have 2 or 3 days to prepare for my husband's return. I wanted to be sure that nothing of Sam would be left in or on my body, no smells, no residual sperm, nothing. The phone call troubled me late that night, but I finally fell asleep. I was at work on Friday when, just before lunch, my whole universe shuddered to a halt. I heard my name mentioned by a man in a dark brown suit that was ill-fitting, and he looked a bit hard around the eyes as he walked toward me. "Giselle Hartman?" I asked. "Yes, can I help you?" "You've been served," he said, and with that, my whole world crumbled around me. I wasn't sure what I was being sued for, but something had to be dreadfully wrong. Without looking in the envelope he'd handed me before he turned and walked out, I called Jim. He'd know what to do. I always have been able to turn to my husband to fix problems for me. He'd fix this up, whatever it was. I tried to call him. That was when I hit speed dial on my cell phone and only heard that Jim's number was no longer in service. Troubled, I looked up his phone number on my caller list and tried dialing it, thinking that the phone company was having issues. I got the same message. Suddenly, I was scared. I felt a chill course through my body as little demons began to poke my heart. Panic set in, and I did the only thing I knew to do. I called Jim's boss, Steven Sedgwick. "Steve, I can't seem to get a hold of Jim. Do you know where he's staying?" "Giselle?" "Yes, this is Giselle." "Steve, you know me. Why are you calling here?" "Jim quit. His last day was last Friday. He took another job somewhere else. He told me he was moving there permanently." Stunned, I could only sit there, holding my cell phone to my ear. Jim had quit his job. His last day had been last Friday. He'd moved away. I didn't know what to do. I sat at my desk in shock. Not only did I fear for my life now, I realized I just made a fool out of myself to Jim's former boss. I mean, his own wife wasn't aware of what was going on with him. How did that look to anyone seeing it from the sidelines? That brown envelope was looking more and more like a viper waiting to strike me dead. Finally, I opened it up and discovered my affair's cost to me. I lost my husband, the only man I'd ever loved. He was gone. I chased him away with my cheap, tawdry affair, and for what? Some temporary gratification that Jim could have given me, had I let him be with me over the last 6 months. I'm not sure how long I sat at my desk crying, but a coworker finally saw me and led me off to the ladies' room. In tears, I explained what was going on. At first, Mary was angry that my husband could be so cruel. After I explained my part and why he left me, she suddenly got angry at me. Are you stupid or crazy, Giselle? Jesus, that man worshipped the ground you walked on. He loved you, he was totally in love with you, and you do this to him? He's a great catch, and you caught and released him. You have to be out of your mind to let a man as great as Jim go like this. What were you thinking? On your lover's best day, he couldn't be a tenth of the man Jim is on his worst day, you poor, foolish woman. I pity you, I really do. I never knew he'd find out, Mary. I thought I'd have my fling. Jim would never know, and after it was over with Sam, I'd make it up to Jim. Honey, husbands will always find out. Always. They'll notice when you start to act different. All cheaters do that. You know, it's the little things. In the beginning, first, you may slight him in some little way. Your lover's making you feel sexy, your husband obviously didn't, otherwise, your lover wouldn't have gotten to you like he did. Pretty soon, you're so caught up in your affair, you can't see what you're doing to your loving husband. You have to understand, Giselle, Jim knew. He felt it over time, he dug up the facts. I'm sure you didn't see it because you were caught up in your deception and games. Oh God, I've lost him. Maybe, maybe not. He'll need to talk to you, there will have to be closure. He'll need it. You may have a small chance to get him to forgive. He won't forget, but he may forgive you. He served me with divorce papers today. He's been acting strange all week when I talked to him on the phone, and now I can't even call him. I've lost him. He'd never have left like this, quitting his job and everything, unless he'd given up on me. Why couldn't I have seen this? Why did I keep on with Sam? Oh my God, I've ruined my life, my marriage, everything. You'll live, Giselle, trust me. I know, you'll live. How do you know that? I've told you, I've been there. Right here, where you are. I too had an affair. My ex left me. He beat the holy living hell out of my lover, but he left me. I've managed to survive. You cheated on your husband too? Yeah, I never saw the little changes in how I treated my husband until it was too late too. That's the problem with cheating. At first, you're trying to hide everything, so you act differently than you would because, what if your husband discovers that you have another man's leavings in you? Later, you begin to feel some kind of power and that you're getting away with it. So you relax and ease any guilt. You begin to give more to your husband. Later, you start to feel like your husband must be less of a man since you're fooling him so easily and he doesn't have a clue. Usually, the husband has it all figured out way before you know. How did he find out? Don't know. All I know is that one day, I was served, pretty much like you were today. He had pictures, recordings, even a DVD movie of me with my lover. Our lawyers fought it out hard. I fought the divorce, trying to convince my husband that I'd change, that I loved him more than any other man. But it was all for naught. I lost everything I valued in the divorce, my husband and his unadulterated love for me, his queen. I took that pristine love and dirted it all up so that even I wouldn't have been able to forgive myself if I'd been in his shoes. Oh my God, I've lost him. He's gone. I'm all alone. It doesn't look good for you right now, Giselle, but if you work as hard as you can, you may be able to get him to forgive you. He really loved you a lot, and everyone here knows that. You might be able to change his mind about you if you try hard. Giselle, I don't even know where to find him. He quit his job and moved away a week ago. I'm not even sure where he is now. He could be anywhere at all. We'll find him. He'll have to show up eventually. If only to sign the divorce papers. Yeah, but by then, it will be far too late for me or him to reconcile. Call his lawyer and demand that Jim contact you as soon as he can. He may not tell you where to find him, but if you can get Jim to call, you can try to reverse search the phone number and locate where he is. What if he doesn't call me? What then? There are other ways to locate people nowadays, Giselle. We'll find him. We will. Mary tried to sound upbeat and positive, but deep down inside, she was afraid that Jim had flown the coop for a particular reason, and the divorce was probably it. She felt that Jim was going to try to avoid any contact with his soon-to-be ex-wife because he was afraid that he'd buckle under and appear weak by talking to her and then letting himself be convinced into taking his cheating wife back. Mary understood Jim's feelings more than many could realize. Her own husband had told her those same things verbatim when he refused to talk to her about her cheating and the possibility of taking her back. He had even been ashamed that he'd let her talk him into an hour-long talk with his soon-to-be ex, knowing that she'd tried to talk him out of the divorce. In the end, he'd stood strong and left her. Neither had married since then, and Mary was sure that her ex didn't even date. Their divorce had been over 2 years before. Mary had her painful prior experience with divorce, and now she'd do whatever she could to help Giselle with her pain. She knew how Giselle was feeling and just how devastating it was to be served those papers. Giselle needed her help more than she realized, far more than she would know for quite some time. Back to Jim. I've been at work for a few weeks when the call came. Jim, she wants to talk. She's refusing to sign anything, and she said she'll fight the divorce tooth and nail. Oh man, why? She has the man she wants, so why would she fight it? Because she doesn't have the man she wants. I've seen this before, trust me, Jim. She is dying inside right now because you found out, left her, and then hit her with the divorce. I'm not real certain your actions were the best way to go about doing things, but I do understand why. In the end, she'll fight it, delaying the whole mess until it costs a bunch in legal fees. I recommend that you sit and talk with her, get her to give it up. Maybe she'll see how serious you really are and walk away. Then now she wants to talk? No. I tried for months to get her to open up and talk. I tried for months to turn her around and back into the woman I loved and desired. Now she wants to talk? Sorry, I don't mean to blow up like this. It just pisses me off so much. Well, you could probably use the good news then, huh? Good news? Yeah, Sammy boy, her lover just went down hard. Seems he tried to force his way in on Giselle, all pissed off about her breaking it off with him and meaning it. The cops were called, and as they hauled him off to jail, I hear that some other women called the cops and started filing charges too. How did the other women know? Oh, wait, don't answer that. I think I know which little birdie got the word out about him. Why, Jim, I'm surprised you'd think that. I, an officer of the court, could or would do such a thing. I never said you did, Amanda. I can see the light, though. Not to worry, I won't ever tell. I hope the son of a witch goes away for a long, long time. You and me both, Mr. You and me both. Anyway, you want me to set up a meet between you and Giselle? Fine, make it for next Saturday afternoon. I'll meet her at Charo's bar, she'll know where that's at. Hey, you doing okay, Jim? Yeah, still hurts. My new job is keeping me plenty busy, though, so I don't have to think too much about things. Thanks, Amanda. You know, you're one of the few good guys, Jim. I respect you and how you tried to fix things before they got to this point. Too bad Giselle didn't see that until it was too late. Yeah, too bad. Giselle finishes, our talk wasn't good. Jim flat out refused to agree to any chance of reconciliation. He told me I'd burn the bridge to ashes and there was no structure to repair. Our marriage was dead, and he wanted it buried. I finally was forced to sign off on our marriage. I was forced to give up once I heard his voice, saw the look in his eyes. I knew I'd screwed up. I knew he'd never been on this. Maybe, had I seen something like this coming before, I would have had a chance to save our marriage. But now, not a chance in a million. The worst part of all of this? I love him completely, totally, and forever. I just didn't realize how much until it was too late. He found a new job, moved away, and led me to believe he'd be home at the end of the week. Yeah, he lied to me. The problem I have now is knowing that I lied far more for far longer and in a far worse way. My life is empty, my love is gone, evidently headed to jail, my husband gone, and soon to be my ex-husband. All that's left of my marriage is signing the decree. I'm still young enough to start over, but the clock is ticking, and soon I will be in that danger zone for having children. I couldn't keep my first husband, who I loved dearly, even though through my cheating I clearly showed the opposite to those who saw what happened. I signed the final papers today. Decree N being the beginning of the end, decree absolute being what I signed today. So cold, so formal, so empty. Jim finishes, my life has gone through a metamorphosis with Giselle gone, living in a new city, and my new job keeping me busy. I haven't had a lot of time to dwell on the recent past. I have had some nights that were long, cold, and yes, empty. I see some silver linings beginning to show up, though. My business program is working far better than even I hoped for. Our business is leaping ahead with growing momentum thanks to our combined efforts. I found a nice house that I moved into, and one day I hope it becomes home to me too. Lastly, there are a few nice prospects for female companionship on my horizon. I'm a bit gun-shy of new relationships, but I have dated a bit here and there. I hope to get over the nasty mess behind me soon, and then I can begin to look for someone special again. I'm pretty sure they won't look, sound, or act anything like Giselle. That's okay with me, though. I'm just about over her totally now. Just a little more time, and I'll bet even the looks, sounding, or acting like her won't even get to me too much. Story 2. Creating our own family was always the most important thing for me. And I succeeded. I had a wonderful wife, Julia, and a little daughter, Olivia, who was 4 years old. I worked on sewage systems in private homes, a job that provided a decent income. We lived in the city in a small apartment, but I always dreamed of a private house. My wife shared this dream. One day, while installing drainage in a private home in a small village surrounded by breathtaking nature, I found a charming house in a picturesque location. It was a lovely place near the forest with clean air and plenty of wonderful spots for fishing, hunting, or just enjoying a walk. We discussed it with my wife and decided to sell our apartment to buy this house. At the time, I believed it would be a wonderful decision for our entire family. There was a good school and kindergarten nearby. My wife was knowledgeable about gardening and quickly found a job at a large complex where they sold various plants for gardens. There weren't many neighbors, but those we met were very friendly and welcoming. Our closest neighbor was David, an elderly man leading a remarkably active lifestyle, fishing and hunting in the area. We got to know David while shopping, and, hearing about the new residents, he approached us, introducing himself. He mentioned being pleasantly surprised to have young neighbors. We chatted, and our friendly interactions continued. We visited David, and he visited us. Being alone, the old man welcomed the company. His wife had left him a long time ago, a topic he preferred not to dwell on. He claimed not to complain and continued to enjoy life. We spent a considerable amount of time with this seemingly amiable old man. He shared many stories and took us to the most beautiful places in the area. David also took me fishing and hunting, teaching me the intricacies of these activities, helping me adjust to the new environment. The place was undeniably beautiful, and each time I relished the local nature. I liked it here very much. However, over time, I noticed that Julia began behaving strangely. She suddenly decided to paint local landscapes. It was surprising because Julia had never liked painting before and had no interest in this art. Of course, I didn't suspect anything serious, as a new place and a new hobby weren't alarming. So, I calmly allowed Julia to pursue this endeavor. David showed Julia the picturesque locations, often taking her to places he wanted to share. I continued with my work. In the city where we used to live, my parents resided. Sometimes we took Olivia to stay with them so she could spend time with her grandparents. That allowed Julia and me to be alone. We had wonderful evenings. However, the longer we lived in this place, the less frequently I found the opportunity to be alone with Julia. It seemed as if her thoughts were elsewhere, as if she distanced herself from me. We communicated less. This began to seriously worry me, and I wanted to reach out to her. Julia, I've wanted to ask you for a while now. I've noticed a change in you. We're communicating less. Can you explain what's happening? Darling, don't talk nonsense. Everything is wonderful, after all. Julia, I'm asking you to be honest with me. Since you immersed yourself in the world of painting, we spend much less time together. I, too, appreciate the local nature. But we are a family, and we should prioritize each other's time. Michael, I understand you. Forgive me, perhaps, I got a bit carried away. But what's wrong with that? We're having a great time. David tells me so much interesting stuff and shows me many fascinating places. He does take you along, too. Why are you getting so worked up? That old man, honestly, has started to get on my nerves. I understand he's lonely and bored, but we have our own family and our own matters. I think we need to distance ourselves a bit from his intrusiveness. Yes, only recently I noticed that he's been giving me more of his time. I don't really get why you're so negative. This kind and polite man is doing his best to befriend us. Well, lately, I've noticed that he's been taking up more of your time. I'm not jealous of you with that old man, but I don't like that he's constantly meddling in our lives. Michael, I can't understand. Did you not get enough sleep today, or what's the problem? Why are you emitting so much negativity? I didn't notice any problems until you started expressing them. I just lived and enjoyed life. I never thought such thoughts were brewing in your mind. I didn't want to tell you right away. But I'm not blind. This situation worries me, and I'm starting to feel anxious. I just don't want there to be any secrets in our family. We have a little daughter who requires attention and care. I just want our family to be strong, and we can rely on each other at all times. Michael, don't stress yourself out. Everything will be fine. We'll always be together. You have absolutely nothing to worry about. I love you madly and will never betray you. You can always count on me. I promise to dedicate more time to the family, so don't worry. I had wanted to trust Julia completely. But something was holding me back. I felt that something was off. Sometimes, I hated myself for these excessive suspicions. I didn't want to be like a psychopath who constantly suspected and accused his wife. Moreover, now Julia had started to spend more time at home again. I suppressed all negative emotions and tried to continue enjoying life. Julia behaved as if nothing had happened. We were a close-knit family with no suspicious moments. I continued to advance in my work, aiming to save enough money for Olivia's education in the future. I started taking more orders, and Julia began spending more time at home. She occasionally went to her job, working part-time. The primary income in our household came from me, and I enjoyed it. I felt like a provider, securing my family. And I was doing well. It was a relatively peaceful time. I took on numerous orders and often traveled away from our home for several days. I engaged in what I was good at, and I was at ease because I knew everything was well at home. My loving little family always awaited me. But one day, I had to return home earlier than planned. I had informed Julia that I would have to be away for a couple of weeks. During this time, she took some days off to take care of our daughter. There were no signs of trouble. I was supposed to work on a large project, but there was a delay in completing other construction work. I was informed when I was already almost at the site. They told me that my services would be needed later. I wasn't too upset about it. Now, I could spend time with my family. I was returning to the city and wanted to surprise my wife. As I was driving, I suddenly saw Olivia playing with other kids far from home. I was shocked and stopped. I approached my daughter, and there was a woman named Jessica nearby. We had met before but didn't interact much. It turned out that Julia had asked Jessica to look after Olivia for a few days. This shocked me. Jessica had 2 children of her own, and Olivia got along well with them. But still, this decision greatly unsettled me. Why would she hand over our child to someone else when she had days off herself? I tried to get some information from Jessica, but she couldn't tell me much. She said that Julia didn't really explain where she was going. It was very strange and highly unclear. I picked up my daughter, and we headed home. However, no one was at home either. My daughter also didn't know where her mom had gone. With each passing minute, I grew more and more anxious. It was simply awful. I couldn't reach Julia, she just wouldn't answer the phone. I called her at work, but she wasn't there either. I needed to figure this out. I didn't want Olivia to see how worried I was. I took her to my parents' place and returned home. Throughout this time, I continued to call Julia, but she still didn't respond. Usually, during the time I was working, I didn't call her, at least not at that specific time. But what was she doing now? Where was she? I was on the verge of contacting the police when I suddenly remembered David. Perhaps this old man knows something about where Julia went. I immediately headed to his place. David was definitely home. Lights were on in the windows, and gray smoke lazily emerged from the chimney. I approached the door and began knocking. "David, open up. It's Michael." I knocked on the door. Inside, I could hear some commotion, something falling. I didn't wait and opened the door, which was not locked. "David, are you home? I need to talk to you urgently." I approached David's bedroom. As soon as I reached for the doorknob to open the door, David burst out of the room to meet me. "Michael, what the hell are you barging into my house for?" David asked, looking frightened. Apparently, he was completely naked, as he was loosely wrapped in a sheet. "I'm sorry, David, I need your help. Julia has disappeared, and I can't find her anywhere. Your door was open for quite some time, so I walked in." "Michael, you scared me. I have no idea where Julia is. I'm taking a break, so please let me be alone." "All right, David, I'm sorry," I said and turned to leave. David returned to the room, and I headed towards the exit. Suddenly, I noticed a familiar phone on the coffee table. I picked up the phone and recognized it. It was Julia's phone. Anger boiled within me like a furious volcano. I stormed back into the room where David was and kicked the door open. In the room, I suddenly saw a naked Julia, and next to her was that old bastard. "Ah, you scum! Deceitful bastards! So, this is what's going on here," I shouted. "Michael, wait. Let me explain everything." Julia cried out in fear. "You brainless bitch. What are you going to explain to me? You left our child to mess around with this old fart? You're disgusting. Now it all makes sense to me. I couldn't even imagine that you would satisfy an old pervert. I simply can't wrap my head around it. Michael, forgive me. I understand how it looks. I didn't know how to stop it. I just got confused. Please, let's talk." "Shut up, you creature." "Michael, there's no need to get so worked up," David interjected. Rage flashed in my eyes. I grabbed a bottle of wine and smashed it against the table. With a sharp shard, I pressed it against that old bastard's throat so that even a thin trickle of blood flowed out. "Shut up, you wretch. I can barely hold myself back from tearing your throat out or ripping open your frail stomach." He was so scared that he immediately wet himself. It was a disgusting sight. I saw the bastard shaking with fear, and I no longer had any feelings for him other than disgust. "Michael, don't. Please," Julia intervened. I looked at Julia and tossed the shard aside. "You're right. I won't do anything more. Besides, your lover has had enough. I just don't want to see you. Stay here as long as you want, I'm leaving," I said and slammed the door. It was a brutal night. The only thing that made me glad was that I took my daughter to my parents so she wouldn't see my condition. What I saw simply did not fit in my head. It was a horror that I could not fully comprehend. Despair and anger tore me apart. I couldn't control myself. I didn't understand what to do. This pain simply paralyzed my thoughts. But after a while I found the strength to pull myself together. I have to be strong for my daughter. I proceeded to divorce Julia. It was very difficult because I didn't want her to get custody of our daughter. Julia did not want to settle the matter amicably and insisted that she had custody of our daughter. The judge was a fat ant who made it seem like I didn't stand a chance. But I didn't despair, and my lawyer said we could win the case. I didn't want my daughter to end up with this lying and irresponsible woman. But my experienced lawyer was able to help me. He found witnesses and evidence of Julia's reckless life. All her dirt floated to the top, and this helped me keep my daughter. Also, Julia did not receive anything that belonged to me. I won, but it was hard for me to celebrate the victory. There was an emptiness in me that I carefully hid from my daughter. It was not so easy to adjust to a new life. But I had to do it. At this time, Julia began to drink too much. I haven't talked to her for a long time. But mutual friends said that she looked pretty bad. One day she got very drunk and got behind the wheel. On the road, she almost collided with another car and slid into a ditch. The doctors were able to save her. When I found out about this, I thought about everything that had been happening lately. I realized that I would not be able to start a normal new life if I did not let go of all the old grievances. I needed to say goodbye to the past in a good way. And I visited Julia in the hospital. She was pleasantly surprised by my visit. She again tried to tell me something, apologized, but I said that this no longer needed to be done. She tried to convince me that we could resume our relationship, but I laughed in her face and told her that that was not why I was visiting her. I said I was doing it more for me than for her. Because I want to put all this behind me and forget about her forever. And I'm only doing it because she's the mother of my daughter. We agreed that we would not quarrel. I helped Julia get her life back to normal. She underwent treatment for alcoholism. After some time, Julia became a normal person again. She came to her daughter and talked to her. It seemed to me that now everything would be all right. But Julia couldn't give up her dark desires forever. She started drinking again, and one day she was in a serious car accident from which she did not survive. That's how her story ended. As for the old lecher David, he also had a hard time. Someone told me that this bastard's wife left him because he cheated on her. And his depraved lifestyle left him lonely. This finally drove him crazy, and he hanged himself in his house. These events were very dark and difficult to remember. It was hard for me to take care of my daughter. After all, I needed to work. And my parents also could not constantly look after her. So I decided to hire a nanny. And then I met Margaret. This amazing girl agreed to help me. We talked to her, and I realized that I had never met a brighter and sweeter person. Her work eventually became something more. My daughter and I fell in love with Margaret. Then Margaret and I continued to get closer, and now we all lived like one big and friendly family. I was very happy that I had a second chance at a normal life. And now there were no omissions or secrets in our family, thanks to which we were confident in the future.